I don't think he's part of the team's future plans. I really don't. What is the percentage chance Cam Thomas is traded away from the Brooklyn Nets?
Gets it off in time. And he's got it, baby! Big time Nets win!
The only net fans you know? The only Nets fans you know?
Man.
I mean, come on, man. Where are these guys?
Welcome back to Only Net Fans You Know podcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to episode 107. I have a special returning guest, senior writer covering the Nets for the Daily News, former Auburn Tiger, CJ Holmes. What's going on, bro?
Ain't nothing much, man. Thanks for having me.
And I got a lot to discuss with you. I'm going to jump straight into it. NBA draft comes, 5 picks. They wound up trading a second runner that they had. And we get a slew of players that I think a lot of people were not happy with. We had Egor Demin going at 8, Nolan Traore going at 19, Powell at 22, Saraf at 26, and Danny Wolf at 27. As far as you know, what was the game plan? Were the Nets trying to move up to get Dylan Harper? Were they trying to get Ace Bailey? Or was the plan all along to get these picks and just pick your guys and see what sticks to the wall?
Yeah, I think from a reporter perspective, it was just a matter of, there's a lot of smoke around draft time. I think the Nets ended up doing the most surprising thing of all, which was keeping all 5 picks. I know Shams reported hours before the draft that that's where the Nets were leaning, but I think throughout the entire process, a lot of reporters thought that there'd be some type of combination of them. They would either, move up or move down. What none of us saw coming, or the Nets actually keeping all 5 first-round picks and becoming the first team in NBA draft history to roster 5 first-round picks. So I think that was a big surprise to everyone, and now the Nets have quite the developmental project on their hands.
Taking off your reporter hat for a second, and you can keep this as light as you want. From a basketball perspective, do you see the strategy of taking the guys that they took?
Yeah,
does it make sense?
Like on paper, it's certainly a head scratcher. 3 point guards, seldomly used freshman wing, and a versatile big man. I think that's kind of the through line for all these guys. They're all playmakers. Maybe with the exception of Powell, who we haven't seen in summer league thus far, but they're all playmakers. They can all handle the ball. They can all get teammates involved. And what Sean Marks and Jorge Fernandez have said is that, they want players who can play positionless basketball. They want guys who can keep their heads up, make plays, put the ball on the floor. That's something that the team severely lacked last season outside of D'Angelo Russell. So in a way, they looked at their biggest need, and they definitely went for the overkill route in terms of addressing that. How it's going to work out, we're not going to know the success of this year's draft class until years down the road. But, I suppose you can see the vision, especially when you consider a guy like Egor Demin doesn't not have to be your point guard. You can look at future lineups maybe with, Nolan Traore at the 1, Egor at the 3, Wolf at the 4, Claxton at the 5, Powell at the 2 or the 3. So, you can definitely see the vision and the strategy behind the picks, but it doesn't change the fact that it was a little strange.
Just breaking down the picks, I think Egor Demin is the most polarizing coming out of BYU. The big knock on him is his shooting, not athletic enough, and a lot of people thought he was a reach. The way that I look at it is I could study all this game film all that I want, and I'm not getting paid to do this. They obviously watch this guy for hours upon hours, and if that's their guy, then I'm very happy that they took him, and I'm willing to see this play out. But I look at the numbers, and I see some things that bother me. You played Division I basketball at Auburn, so I'm going to ask you something that maybe you could help me out with. I'm looking at Egor's numbers. His first 6 games, 15 points, 58% from the field, 46% from 3. That's the non-conference schedule. Now we move on to the conference schedule and the playoffs. It drops all the way down to 9 points a game, 37% from the field, 22% from 3. So his field goal percentage and three-point percentage dropped 20 points. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things where no matter what conference you play in, when you make that transition from non-conference play to conference play, there's always going to be a jump in competition. And with a guy like Egor, and when I try to make sense of his struggles in non-conference versus conference, I think a lot of that might come down to physicality. And we've seen it a little bit in Summer League as the Nets have been playing.
What has it been like, the ball pressure, the physicality, the transition to that at the NBA level, and what do you think you need to do to be able to be as effective as you were at BYU, as a pick-and-roll playmaker and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a big transition. Same as it was when I just got to the college and started playing conference games, right? Providence game. Everybody saw this game. Can't say it was the best experience I've ever had, but it was really useful game because those games prepared me for the most important part of the season is March Madness, right? Where I was playing point guard full time. And the games against Houston, the games against Iowa State, the games against Arizona, Baylor, where they really trying to break you, especially me when they see me with a high dribbling, right? They're really trying to coaches yo, pressure. For me, it's just time and adjustment. I need to get used to that, spend more time on practices, handling the ball.
He's been jacking up a lot of shots from deep, but you haven't seen a lot of him attacking the rim and getting to the rim. Maybe it has a lot to do with how the Nets are deploying him, how Steve Hetzel wants to use him out there in Vegas. But, the fact of the matter is he hasn't necessarily had the ball in his hands a whole lot in terms of, setting up and running offense. Traore and Serif, they've kind of been the main point guards out there. And even Danny Wolf has been a guy that's been grabbing rebounds and, advancing the ball up the court, initiating offense. There are a lot of ball handlers out there in Vegas for the Nets. And, so far Egor has found himself as the odd man out. But when you kind of look at someone who's, not attacking the lane at a high enough clip, when you kind of look at those struggles back conference play, I think a lot of that might come down to physicality. And that's one of the biggest areas of growth that Egor is going to have to do. He's going to have to find a way to put on some muscle. He's going to have to find a way to fill into his frame and become an imposing force out there on the wing. And, when that comes, obviously his, volume of drives will increase. And another thing is, he has the shot mechanics. I mean, the elbow is tucked. It's one motion. There's not a lot of wasted motion. So he has the tools to become a knockdown shooter in the NBA. And that's what makes a prospect like Egor so tantalizing if you're the Nets. It's the ultimate boom or bust gamble. I think if Egor stays the same throughout his if he just stays the same and we don't see much improvement between now and year 4, I'd still think that Egor can develop into a serviceable NBA rotation piece, given his size and playmaking ability and ball handling, right? But, imagine, Demin at 6'8", if he puts on some muscle. Imagine if Demin does evolve into a guy who can shoot, 38 to 40% from 3 year in and year out. Now you got quite the talent on your hands, and that's the gamble that the Nets are making with him. But, in terms of his drop in production in college, I do think a lot of that probably comes down to the physicality that comes with high-level conference competition. Did I watch every possession that he played at BYU? No, I did not. I'm not going to sit and pretend like I did, but someone who's been through that, and someone who's seen teammates drop off in that regard from conference play to regular, usually just comes down to the physicality and the increased competition. You got to understand the kid's only 19 years old, right? He's out there playing against some, 50-year seniors and grown men out there, and your body has to adjust to that. So I think as Demin gets stronger while he's in the NBA now, I think that's when we'll see him maybe taking a few more risks, with his body, putting his body on the line a little more and showing more physicality primarily on drives to the rim.
I'm so happy you brought up Summer League. Has anyone stood out to you? For me, it's Touré's first step. We knew it was good, but Jesus Christ, he's that first step is elite, right now.
Yeah. I do think out of the 4 rookies we have seen, Nolan has been the most impressive. That first step is definitely something that Demin could use. Imagine Demin with first step like that, right? I think that's a lot of the reason why he might struggle against, quicker, more physical competition, because he doesn't have that electric first step to get around guys. Nolan certainly does, and it's electric, and he's been fearless. He can get downhill in an instant. And, that's his superpower. If you want to use Jordy Fernandez, verbiage, that is his superpower. It's always has been his superpower. The question of him is what's going to be that next step? How does it look when he's out there with, it gives me hope for him because, what's it going to look like when he's out there with NBA spacing, right? When you have Micheal Porter Jr. in a corner occupying a defender and you're in a pick and roll of Nick Claxton, right? Because there's not a lot of elite finishers around him on this summer league team, but you could see how his game would translate into a more stable, talented environment. So it's definitely exciting to watch. And like we talked about earlier, the Nets don't need all 5 of these guys to be stars. They just need 1 or 2. And, it's early. Jury is still out on everyone, right? But through 2 summer league games, no one in his blazing speed has definitely stood out. There's not a lot of guards out there in Vegas who can move like him.
Summer league is it's such a small sample that I'm not too concerned with the numbers. I look to see if people are getting open, they're taking good shots. Are they lost on defense? Do we see flashes of some skills? Like Danny Wolf is someone who I was very high on, and I believe in the handles. I believe in the playmaking, but a lot of turnovers. That's a little concerning. We knew that there was going to be an adjustment. Do you think that's something that he's just first games right now? That's not really a concern because he definitely has the vision.
Yeah, for sure. I like Danny as a prospect a lot. I've talked to some folks over at the University of Michigan. They said one thing Danny has always struggled with throughout his career is paralysis by analysis. He's a guy who soaks up so much information that it kind of overloads him at times, which could lead to some turnovers and some foolish decisions. Always trying to make the flashy pass instead of the simple pass, like those kind of situations. But Danny certainly has all the tools. He's another guy who I think could benefit from a little bit more bulking up. Danny's 7 feet, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's an opposing physical force out there. And, some of his turnovers are just he goes up, snatches the rebound, and just gets knocked out of his hands. He's a guy who has to learn how to be stronger with the ball. Not only in triple threat, but when driving and attacking the rim, needs to work on keeping guys on his hip and keeping guys on his shoulder and using his frame to finish through people. But man, that's the thing with this class. Like, there's whether it's Drake Powell we haven't seen yet, or Nolan Traore, or Egor Demin, all these guys. Or even Ben Seraph, who we can touch on at least a little bit. But all these guys have NBA tools. All of them have NBA tools of one or another. They're first-round picks for a reason. If the Nets didn't take them, someone else would have, right? So it's just a matter of which one of these guys are going to add to their tool bag while fortifying their bodies for the NBA game. And Danny's a guy that you put some muscle on, he cuts down on those turnovers, all of a sudden you have one of the more versatile bigs in the league.
I think you're absolutely right. All right. I guess you could say the biggest move of the offseason was the Cam Johnson to Denver trade. Nets get back Micheal Porter Jr., and they get a 2032 unprotected first-round pick from Denver. What's your first take when you heard it?
I mean, the first take is that 2032 first-round pick from Denver has a ton of value. That's a pick that's projected to be in Jokic's twilight if he's still on the Denver Nuggets.
37.
Yeah, that's going to be his twilight years. Not to mention he's a big, so bigs don't necessarily age the same way guards do in this game. And that's assuming he's still on Denver's roster at all. So that could be a juicy pick in future seasons. But also, I just like how you were essentially able to keep equal value in a Porter for Johnson swap. They're very similar players. They have very similar stat lines. And, I want to say Porter's a little younger than Cam J, too, right?
Yep.
So, I think that was a pretty fair value trade. We've heard from Porter a little bit recently since the trade. He's a guy who believes that he still has a lot of untapped potential. He was kind of like the third option, sometimes fourth option in Denver. How is he going to act on a Brooklyn team with the greenest light on planet Earth? So it'll be interesting to see how he develops. He not develops. He is who he is right now. But what's that next step that he can take as a player? And he believes that he still has a lot left in the tank, especially on offense. So who knows? Maybe he's a player who can develop into a true number one option, and then that's a box checked for the Nets moving forward in their rebuild. At the very least, he's a guy who they could absorb his contract for a couple of years and potentially flip him down the line if he is playing good basketball, the same way they did for Cam Johnson.
He's making 38.3 this year, and next year he's making 40 million. Essentially, the Nets take on 17.2 million on their cap space to get that very valuable Denver pick. I thought it was a good trade. What do you think Micheal Porter Jr.'s role is going to be? Because he's going to have a very important role because he has to space out this floor, right?
His role will be buckets. I'm serious, man. His role will be buckets. This is going to be a team that could potentially have up to 4 rookies on the court with him at any given time, potentially next season. And as we've seen in Summer League, these rookies got ways to go, and none of them are considered elite offensive threats at this point in their careers. So the Nets are going to need a way to score the basketball, and make no mistake, that is why Micheal Porter Jr. is on this roster. Especially if things don't work out with Cam Thomas and he walks, they're going to need someone who can score the basketball consistently, and that's where Micheal Porter Jr. comes in.
Absolutely, and you bring up Cam Thomas. That's sort of the last question of this offseason. Is it going to happen? Are they going to trade him? Are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to let him walk? It's such a polarizing thing over here because some teams really like him and some teams really don't like him. They see him as just a 20-point scorer on a bad team. In my opinion, Cam Thomas has earned a contract. He just picked the wrong year to be a free agent with all these teams being tapped out and not even being able to offer him a contract. The Nets have all the leverage to lowball him.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of a market for Cam Thomas, right? If there was, I know restricted free agents have been a little slow in signing this offseason, but, if there was a big market, one can assume that he'd have a contract by now. The fact that he doesn't kind of speaks volumes to how the league views him, and it's unfortunate that the league views him in that way, because I do think Cam Thomas is young and talented and has a lot of untapped potential that can contribute to a contributor if asked. But Cam Thomas hasn't been in that position for a lot of his career, right? And he's kind of made the best of the cards he was dealt. I think at this point it is likely that Thomas is back in Brooklyn next year, but man, I hope that he can kind of internalize this process and use it as fuel to go out there and prove what kind of player he can be, because it definitely isn't a good feeling when the team kind of dares you to test free agency and there's nothing you can come back with. But I do think a lot of that has to do with there not being a lot of money to go around this off season, and Cam is polarizing if anything, right? So it's definitely a tough situation, but don't feel too bad for the guy. He's going to be getting his M's one way or another. And, I think the best thing for Thomas would be to sign a shorter term deal. Once you do get to that level, you can prove, what kind of guy you can be. Then, at that point you can be free to sign with any team in a couple years, if not extend in Brooklyn.
He's 24 years old.
It's ridiculous.
That's insane. There's still going to be some development there. I think right now, if Cam Thomas does not do anything to his game, he could at least be a microwave scorer off the bench for a team. Do you agree with that?
I agree completely. I think Cam has, greater aspirations for himself. But at some point, and that's part of the problem, no one really knows how to best use Cam Thomas. Jacques Vaughn was struggling with it for years. And I think Jordy had a better sense, but Cam couldn't stay on the court last year. So no one really knows what's the best way to use Cam Thomas. But at some point, Cam's going to have to decide what kind of player he wants to be. And there's no shame in being a 6-man microwave scorer. There is no shame in that. Guys like Jamal Crawford, they've made careers out of that. Have gone down as some of the best to ever do it. So at some point, for Cam, I hope that he can be in a situation where his role is clear and defined. But more so than anything, I hope, Cam can decide exactly like what kind of guy he wants to be and go out there and execute.
I think the Nets need him personally because you need all the spacing you can get with the players that they have on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want a young asset to walk for nothing. But looking at the draft, looking how he's been treated in Brooklyn, I don't think he's part of the team's future plans. I really don't. When you have only so many spots for guards, I don't know. It just feels a little fishy to me. It feels a little fishy to me. I don't know if it's they don't want to pay him or whatever, but it just feels a little fishy to me. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Seems like a good place to leave it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Last question with this. What is the percentage chance Cam Thomas is traded away from the Brooklyn Nets? Just a guess.
Say like 35, 40%. I don't got any real reasoning behind that number. I just think that if they ultimately don't bring back Cam Thomas, and he's not going to be on the roster to be traded anyway, and, if they just simply like let him go somewhere and don't match that offer sheet, right? But, I think if they do go ahead and give him like a 2-3 year deal, I think he'll be around.
What's your grade for the Brooklyn Nets offseason, CJ?
I mean, I want it my first reaction is like incomplete, I guess. But I don't know. I give them a B. They maintain financial flexibility. They drafted a young core. They were able to continue to compile valuable assets. I think regardless of, the product they put out there on the court this season, I think they did exactly what they said they were going to do. And for that, I believe they deserve, at least a little bit of praise. I give them a B.
So I think I know your answer to this, but has the overhype of no man's land, as Bill Simmons said, has that been exaggerated a little bit? Should Sean Marks be arrested?
I don't think Sean Marks should be arrested. Come on now, but
That's what you're saying.
It's just like I said, drafting 5 rookies, having them all have similar skill sets, trading Cam Johnson for essentially Cam Johnson. That the questions are on paper, it's like kind of head scratching, but like I said, they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. And I would rather the Nets, build this way than the blow the bank on like Giannis or something and like overreact, right? The Nets have a chance to build organically for the first time in a very long time. I think we need to see where this thing goes and see what Marks is cooking. Maybe he's cooking up some trash. We don't know. But the point of the matter is it's too soon to make a judgment on any of these things. None of these rookies have played in the NBA game. And, a lot of future moves haven't even been made yet, So let's kind of just see how it goes. But for the most part, they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. They're maintaining financial flexibility. They're being opportunistic. So I think that counts for something, and I think that at least earns them a passing mark.
Yeah, I definitely. I'm not gonna lie. Draft night, I was not happy, but I've sat down. I caught myself. I got collected.
You clutched your pearls,
And I'm gonna give it a C+ right now. But that could go up to a B- depending what they do with Cam Thomas. I would be very upset if they let him walk for nothing. Who's your rookie that you're going to watch? Who's like your guy for this upcoming season?
It's definitely Danny Wolf, man. I got some. My best friend helped coach him at the University of Michigan. I've been hearing a lot about him all year long, even before the Nets selected him. So I'm definitely interested to see how Danny develops at the NBA level and what kind of player he can be. Because again, like I said at the top of the show, if Danny Wolf puts it all together, and all of a sudden the Nets have one of the more versatile bigs in the NBA, and that really changes how you can attack teams. So my eye is definitely on Danny Wolf, the last of the 5. I I want to see what he can become at the NBA level, because I think he's definitely talented enough. He can get past the analysis, paralysis by analysis of his own mind. I think he can become a hell of a player.
Man, I'm going to be putting my focus into Nolan. That first step is just dynamic. I hope he gets some starting time. It would be very, very interesting. I know Egor is probably going to be the starter at point guard just out of being picked so high. But I think Nolan is going to surprise people. I think he's going to surprise people this year. All right, CJ. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get some plugs in there for you.
And man, you can find me on Twitter at HomesCribe or on Instagram at CJ Holmes22.
All right, guys, you're watching on YouTube. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe, leave a like. You can follow me at NetFriendsYouKnow on Twitter. Have a good day, have a good night, and let's go Nets. We're out.